Chapter 11. Unlike the Marshal station, Svetlana Petrov, attorney at law, didn't have a robot sentry with a burner facing down a visitor to her office. A pleasant young man in a white shirt and bolo tie behind the desk had Miles sit on a leather couch. Faint piano music played, cool air descended from a vent. A crystal bowl held an assortment of wrapped hard candy. The wall art was drizzled lines of bright colors on rectangular blocks of black, weathered wood. Miles stared at the painting for a moment, before deciding he hated it. Svetlana came through a door by the reception desk. She wore a fixed smile devoid of warmth. "Miles Kim? You're from the Marshal's office." "Yes, although I'm not a sworn officer. Marshal Barma hired me to assist with his investigation." "Come in, deputy." She held the door open and he entered. For a high-end attorney with a rarefied criminal clientele, Svetlana Petrov kept things simple. A small desk, a couple of ferns, a wall-screen monitor, and a floor-level window with lace shears looking out at the ugly back lot. The two red-lacquered chairs had only a thin, leather-covered cushion. Miles failed to get comfortable. Svetlana rounded her desk and eased into a swivel chair, then turned off a tablet and folded it into its keyboard. On the desk was a hoop bracelet, rainbow-colored, something a child might wear. She popped it into a drawer. "Now that the Marshal is no longer involved in the investigation, why are you here, Mr. Kim? Your client Lucian's life is in danger. I need to know where he is." "I think the Marshal made the case for that earlier. Lucian has private security, quite capable. I vet them, and his father wouldn't allow me to hire anyone but the best." "I appreciate you coming in person to remind us. Was there anything else?" "You heard what happened to his father. Your client Shahid Kar?" Her smile vanished. "Yes, I've been informed. News like this travels quickly, and considering my client, it made it to me with light speed. All of us here are devastated, naturally. And Lucian falls under your legal care?" "Yes, I will continue to offer him counsel during this difficult time. In fact, I'm in the middle of a mountain of work. Do you have something you can add to what I know about the event that's relevant to your visit?" Miles adjusted himself on the seat so his hip would hurt less. "I don't know what you know. I know Lucian was there." "What proof?" "Start with the car which he or someone in your office helpfully cleaned. His shoes. And we're only getting second-hand information about what else the Red Banners found at the crime scene. Is this an official or unofficial inquiry?" "I'm not the Marshal." "And that's not an answer. Don't try to snow me. And whatever recording device you might be hiding in that noggin of yours, turn it off if you want to have a less formal conversation." He made a show of tapping his head. "This old thing? My insight module's so outdated nothing it sees or hears could ever be admissible. But it's off. And like I said, I'm just assisting." "Lucian didn't kill his father or the other two men," she said plainly. "How can you be sure?" "Because he told me. He didn't even know what happened inside that container, except that there was a shootout and there was no one alive after. He looked in, saw his own father, along with the other two men lying there, and he ran." "Straight here?" "What? Did he come straight here or did he stop somewhere first?" Svetlana took a package from a drawer, shook a white mint into her hand, and popped it into her mouth. "He called me, then we met here. He was deeply distressed at what happened. He's an actor." She crunched on the candy and chewed. "He's a boy who doesn't know what he wants from life, is on the 6-year college plan with no degree, and he isn't capable of orchestrating this. I need to see him. Why do you believe his security detail isn't up to protecting him?" He leaned forward to relieve the pressure on his hip, but the chair instantly began cutting circulation to his legs. "First concern is the people who came for Lucian. Pros. If his bodyguards aren't up to snuff, they're going to lose. Add to that, whatever went down last night has the sheriff and the Red Banners hiding a triple murder. You don't think he did it. I let the evidence talk, but my gut says no. And you trust me enough to share your speculations?" "Off the record, yes. Maybe it's because I don't know any better." "Smart man, Mr. Kim. Perhaps if you've been up against me in court, you'd see me otherwise. My read is that you're interested in serving your client. It could be because, without him and with his father gone, you're out of a job. Even with his death, Shahid Khar's business interests will provide me with enough comfortable work for the rest of my career. But I do care for Lucian. I saw him grow up, and his father was good to me, and I owe him. The question remains, can I trust you? Miles made a show of his hands, as if he had nothing else to offer. Svetlana sighed and worked her mouth with her tongue as if to dislodge something stuck in her teeth. All right, I'll check with Lucian. Tell him you're coming. His bodyguards will have the final say if you get to stay. If they tell you to leave, you leave. If Lucian asks you to go, you go. Okay. One question before you get out of my office. Why did Marshal Barma hire you? That's an easy one. Deep discount, and I came cheap. Chapter 12. Get rid of him. The bodyguard was a beefy thug with face inks which looked fresh and a bulging frontal lobe. His black and white checkered sports coat was stretched tight over his biceps and chest. The butt of a burner leaned out from a shoulder holster and didn't hide the fact it was a chrome-plated monster of a weapon, not meant for small spaces. We don't need him, the bodyguard continued. He's gonna get in the way. A second guard grunted in agreement. He was leaning close to Miles, nose wrinkled and looking him up and down like he was inspecting a piece of stinking meat. He wore a carefully groomed face of stubble, and his hair was slick and crispy with gel, which smelled of leather. Lucian Carr had opera playing on a sound system. He sat in a lounge recliner with a stemmed glass holding a ruby liquor inside it, garnished with a citrus peel. He wore oversized shorts, a brown silk shirt buttoned below his hairless chest, and a small hat and sunglasses. They were on the back deck of Lucian's townhouse. Below them lay a willow-lined lazy river, which ran the length of the exclusive complex, a landscaping feature which must have cost a fortune. Above the open-air courtyard stood vapor collectors like billowing sails. The air held moisture. A mother or nanny was minding a pair of children down below, who were wading ankle-deep in the flowing water. How everyone living in a Jupiter hab imagined life on Earth would be like after the return migration. You heard them, Lucian Carr said. Get lost. Miles gave Stubbleface a gentle but firm shove backward. Not until I have my say. You had your say, Lucien said. I have people after me, hardly a new thing. I had 2 kidnapping attempts before I was 7. My complex has security. I have Theo and Matt to protect me. What else do you have to share? Stubbleface's grimace intensified. Now you can leave. Miles had lost track, if he was Theo or Matt. I only need a few minutes. You were at the scene. Did you set foot inside the container where your father and the others were meeting? Lucien sipped his beverage, pointed to the air. You hear that music? The Lonely Squire. One of the tin can operas which we hope to perform at the theater once we're done with Satra. I heard a company in Pack City has a whole series of similar productions. You couldn't have missed the gunfire before you ran. Did you hear anything before or after? Voices? Parts of conversations? We're going to place actors in set locations out of sight from each other, engineer acoustics to match what you might experience in one of the smaller habitats, to recreate the experience of singing a duet or a trio with someone not in the same compartment. Imagine it. I'm sure it will be magical, Miles said dryly. After the shooting, did you consider trying to see whether your father was hurt or needed help? We would do the same thing with the musicians. A trumpet here, a clarinet there, viola and cello on opposite ends of the theater. The audience would be in the center of the experience, the stage nowhere and everywhere. Tell me, did your hap ever put on one of these productions? I was 5 when we emigrated back to Earth. I'm sure they're archives. Lucian waved off the suggestion. Poor substitute for being there, and the recordings are terrible. I want first-hand memories to shepherd the project along. I'd rather talk about last night. We can discuss Earth and Jupart movements another time. Perhaps I'm talking to the wrong Kim. Your son is involved in a stage production. Perhaps I should visit him. Miles felt an icy grip on his heart. What is? Your son Dylan. He's invested in the theater. A little financial push and his fundraiser play could hit it big. Of course, I might have a few suggestions. And I never developed the taste for seeing young children on stage. Must be a parent thing. Untrained voices are one thing, but it's the reluctance I have no stomach for. At least they should wait until the child can grasp the material and develop a fire in their belly for the work. Why the long face? My son has nothing to do with this, or you. Of course he doesn't. I thought it prudent to know who was showing up here, implying I know or care what happened in the crotch end of this sun-blasted hellhole of a town. If you have an accusation, tell it. Otherwise, I have no answers to your questions. There was a shooting. I departed. That is the simple answer, and I want to believe you, Miles said. But there are others who won't take your word that you know nothing. I get it that you got scared and left. From what I saw, there wasn't anything you could have done to save your father. Save him? Lucian spat. Save him? I wouldn't save him if he were burning alive before me and I had a bucket of piss to douse it all out. Scared? Of course I was scared. I didn't want to be out in that garbage pit in the middle of the night. When the burner started firing, I jumped in the car and left. When he didn't call, I knew he was dead. Where did you drive to right after? Again, the hand wave, as if the conversation could be fanned in another direction. It doesn't matter. I'm tired. I'm tired of you and this conversation. Stubble-Face took Miles by the arm and walked him through the townhouse towards the exit. The music got louder. The door slammed behind him. But even through the door, Miles could hear the melody. He knew the lonely squire. While he didn't have his insight module until he was grown and a soldier fighting in the war, the songs of the opera had been firmly etched in his young mind. He had never understood the words. The singers had sung it in its original Korean, and his parents had stuck to English at home. Two singers plied their voices, separate but joined in song. A haunting sadness to the refrain, a love lost and never to be united, a longing for a life they could never have. That at least was the story his 5-year-old mind conjured. Even as he later learned, the tale in the opera wasn't anything remotely romantic. The eponymous squire merely reminding his lady that her horse was prepped for the day's ride. He preferred his own interpretation. The duet followed him out to the street. Voices together in space, yet separated by a void, forever alone. Chapter 13. The two people who were watching the front of Lucien Carr's building hadn't moved from the shady spot beneath the ash tree since Miles had returned to the marshal's parked car. He had taken the first spot available, which was in the sun. Barma's vehicle's interior broiled. The seat and steering wheel were almost too hot to touch. A selection of food wrappers lent the driver's compartment an aroma of spoiled meat and rancid dipping sauces. But for the moment, he endured it all as he watched the car with its two passengers. Zooming in, he saw one man, one woman, both neatly groomed but not expensive neat. Likewise the car, a plain sedan, trying to be too plain. Cops. Without the decals, there was no way to know who they belonged to. Red District, Yellow Tiger, Sheriff Department, or some fourth-party security firm. But besides their superior parking spot, they didn't appear to have noticed him. Who they were might be less important than why they were there. He got out of the subcompact. One cop, the woman, perked up as he approached the back of the vehicle. She was fighting with her seatbelt as he crouched next to her door and knocked on the window before showing his hands empty. Got a sec? She rolled down the window. An older officer, working out of uniform, patterned blouse and cricket cap, with a snub-nosed slug thrower in his shoulder holster. What do you want, Mr. Kim? I guess introductions aren't necessary. Can I see some ID? The driver leaned forward. Older man with a bulbous nose which had been broken more than once in the distant past. You can see the tip of my boot when it gets planted up your ass." The woman gestured for the man to stop, pulled a yellow tiger ID card with their identity and a badge. "Detective Luann Ringer." "What are you doing here, Mr. Kim?" she asked. "Concern for my fellow citizen. And I wanted to know who else was visiting. You guys security detail or here to question Lucien? Red District Militia has the case, doesn't it?" "We're here to keep the peace. Your presence isn't necessary." "Good that everyone here is of the same mind in that regard. Since we're both off the investigation, maybe we can share notes." The driver scoffed. "Share notes? Luann, get rid of this guy." "There's nothing to share," Detective Ringer said. "Lucien Carr is a person of interest in a major crime, and we're here to make sure Red District doesn't drop the ball. We're still lead law enforcement in Seraph, so I'm going to ask you to vacate the area and don't come back." Miles' grin was 100% professional courtesy. "Since you asked so nicely, before I leave you to it, do you have any idea why the president of your agency was meeting alone with Shahid Carr and Sander Trowbridge?" "Leave." It had been worth a try. Sometimes a rank-and-file detective might ache to share something they knew. He'd have to check with Santa Budra Sin and see if the detectives were who they claimed to be. He didn't want to use his connection with her for this, but he was out of fresh ideas. As he headed for the car, he hurried to get out of the way as a cruiser bearing Red District markings sped in his direction. A pair of cops got out. Miles was ready to raise his hands, expecting a pat-down and arrest, but the officers ignored him. They were moving down the sidewalk, heading straight for Lucien Carr's front door. The Yellow Tiger detectives got out of their vehicle and moved to intercept. The four militia cops began talking loudly and pushing at each other. "You have no operational authority here," Detective Ringer shouted at one of the Red District troopers. "Get back in your car." "We have a warrant to detain the witness," one of the Red District men yelled back. "Orders of the sheriff and our commander. Don't like it, call your supervisor. Now get out of our way." Both the driver and the second Red Banner trooper appeared ready to pull their sidearms. Miles put a parked utility van between him and the four officers. Something barreled down the sidewalk towards him. He dove aside into the space between the van and Barma subcompact. A robot delivery dog, that was all. A delivery dog doing its thing. But on the sidewalk? Something was wrong. The silver robot sprinted smoothly past, almost soundlessly, and raced straight for the four officers. "Look out!" Miles shouted. But the officers weren't paying attention. The dog wasn't stopping, and when it got close, it detonated. He spat as he tried to keep his balance just to sit up. The explosion had shifted the van sideways. It now rested in the street 90 degrees to the sidewalk. The front half was peeled open as if it were a rind of a metallic fruit. If there had been anyone inside, they were gone, along with the engine. The other vehicles closer to the point of detonation were likewise torn to shreds. A shallow crater stood where the officers were, and there were no bodies, no delivery dog, nothing. He stood, but the world swam and he fell. Tried to touch his face, clear his eyes, check himself for injuries. He worked his jaw, but the ringing threatened to overwhelm him. Shapes moved in the swirl, phantoms or zephyrs, but he saw feet. Insight identified combat boots, make and model, but failed to uplink with SeraphNet to check for nearby vendors. The boots came, the boots left. More than one set. Somewhere distant, another explosion. Burner fire. He reached for a weapon that wasn't there. The caretaker spiders came at night, but sometimes would attack in the middle of the day just to change things up. And when the boots ran past a second time, Miles felt the world slip by. "Give him another," a female voice said. A second woman, standing close, replied, "Wait a moment, Captain. He's coming too. Be patient." "This is taking too long." Sheets. Miles felt smooth sheets. Nearby machines hummed and distant voices echoed from a hallway. He lay in a bed in a white room. Attached to either arm were monitors and a hydration line, oxygen cannula fixed to his nose. An itching sensation began at the tip of his metal fingertips and ran up past the elbow to his shoulder and along his neck and into his head. but his movement was restricted, his left arm encumbered by the cords and his artificial right arm refusing to move at all. He fought back a wave of panic. It was like being paralyzed. "Hello, Miles. I'm Imani, your nurse. Can you speak?" "Barely. Where am I?" "With Creek Hospital. Do you remember what happened?" He tried to nod and regretted it instantly as he fought down a wave of nausea. "A bomb." Captain Sin leaned in to get a look at his face. "I need to speak with Miles privately. He needs to rest. He will, after he talks to me." The nurse departed and closed the door as she left. Santa Butra's expression softened. "How are you feeling?" "Like a nuke went off next to me. Early guess tells us it was a mining charge strapped to the bottom of a delivery dog. Express service says the unit was offline, so someone hacked it. There ought to be a law. You could have been killed. What were you doing at Lucien Carr's house anyway?" Miles fought to prop himself up on an elbow. "What happened to the cops outside?" Santa Butra shook her head. "We lost them. 2 Yellow Tiger detectives, both 20-year vets. Red District officers, both had families." "What about Lucien Carr?" She took a moment before replying. "Missing. His bodyguards were shot up. One's in a coma, the other didn't survive the ambulance ride." Miles let the news settle in. There was a team there on the tail of that dog. "And we're investigating. Lie back and rest. It's not your business. Marshal Barma is in the loop, but it's out of his hands too. Sheriff's orders." "And Yellow Tigers do what the sheriff says?" "It's how things work here. The mayor directs the sheriff assigns cases, not part of our organization's mandate. Save the fine print. Who's gonna find the kid? A district has investigation authority. This is big and ugly enough that my militia is helping with checking for witnesses and electronic footage, anything which might show us who the perps were and where they went after." Miles studied her for a moment. "Your agencies are working together all of a sudden?" "It's complicated. There's unpleasant history, but if everyone keeps their head and does their job, we might get something done. From the look on your face, you haven't found anything." "I'm not part of it. I'm still on admin restriction pending the internal probe follow-up after the Agatha Fish matter." "You told me not to ask you about that," Miles said. "How's it going?" "This is why I don't date cops. Ex-cop, and officially we aren't dating. Has Red District shared anything about the shooting at the junkyard?" She cut loose with an irritable sigh. "I'll tell you because what I know isn't through official channels. But they wrapped the investigation up by noon today and reported it as a double murder. Shahid Carr shot Trowbridge and Patton and was likewise gunned down, neat and clean. Except no one knows why they were there in the first place without their guards. What does it matter? It matters for Lucien Carr. He was there and someone believes he knows something." Dylan stuck his head in the door before entering. "Hey." He kissed Santa Butra on the cheek. She rose and patted Miles' leg. "Get rest. Dylan, call me if he tries to leave before the doctor says he's cleared." Miles watched her go. He found he had enough strength to fiddle with his unresponsive cybernetic arm. "What's wrong?" Dylan asked. "Let me get the nurse." "No, nurse, it's my arm. They unplugged it." "Dad, they're bandages." "If the connection is intact, I'm reconnecting it." Dylan assisted, and the limb was back in operating condition after a moment of fussing. He clenched and unclenched his hand as the virtual sensations returned. He unplugged the PIC line feeding him the saline and removed the oxygen tube on his nose. "Stop it," Dylan said. "Look, I'm grateful you're here, but I'm not spending the day inside this place. I want to go back to my hotel. I'll get rest there." "You haven't even told me what happened." "No one has. There was a bomb. Someone killed 4 cops and kidnapped Shahid Carr's son. That's the case I was working on. I'm off it now. Like I told you, I'm sorry about bringing Zoe along with me earlier, but the bad guys took what they wanted, and all I want is to get out of this place, go to my hotel room, and lie down on my bed." Chapter 15. Miles climbed out of the car at the curb in front of his hotel. He fought to keep steady, not wanting Dylan to see how wobbly he was. "Let me at least walk you up and get you settled." Dylan said. Miles raised a bag of supplies they had picked up from the drugstore. Bandages, rubbing alcohol, body wipes, groceries. I've got what I need. You have your event. You only checked your phone 8 times while we were in the store. I'll call you this evening. You're going up and straight to bed? I promise. He went to the hotel entrance and watched as Dylan drove off. Was about to march back out when a fresh wave of dizziness hit him. He gripped the door to keep from falling. Maybe an hour's rest? It was late afternoon, just after 4. A nap, and then he could decide what to do and how to proceed. He caught his reflection in the door. His clothes were a mess, and his hat had a tear, leaving part of the brim dangling. At least his device had survived the blast. Turned it on. No messages. He'd have to check in with Barma. If Red District handled the abduction like they had the scene of the shootout, they'd scan it, clear it, and forget it. If Barma could get him access to any surveillance footage from the explosion, Miles hoped he could start his own search. Insight hadn't seen enough to have a clear picture of the event. The clock was ticking. Every moment the perps had Lucien was time they might extract whatever they wanted to learn from him. They needed him alive only long enough to share what he knew, even though Miles couldn't shake the gut feeling the kid knew nothing. Kid? Not a kid. A young man living an extended childhood, playing up how dangerous he was by dangling the fact he knew about Dylan. So, did he sit out of the fatal meeting where his father had met his end because he wasn't interested? Or had he not been invited? Surely Lucien was smart enough to know that his father wouldn't meet with the likes of Xander Trowbridge and Bing Patton unless it was important and profitable. Too many dangling questions. His head hurt. Miles almost cried out in surprise when the dog came running at him from across the street. It jammed its muzzle against his side and started whining. Miles stroked its head and sighed and gave it a pat. I missed you too, buddy. But I need to go in there, and you can't come. Did Seraph have an animal shelter? Only then did he realize Insight hadn't rebooted. He left the mental switch alone. Promised himself he'd check for a shelter first thing, after his nap. The dog's whine grew especially pitiful when Miles stepped into the lobby. The manager was asleep at his desk behind the partition. Miles made a kissing sound, and the dog hurried to his side. They climbed the stairs together. An hour later, he lay on his back, feeding chunks of a wrapped date crunch bar to the dog, who sat attentively on the floor with its snout on the sheets. It had drunk its fill of water and then some, and had been perfectly quiet so far. The ringing in his ears was an unpleasant buzz, which felt like it would be around for a while. Dylan had purchased some painkillers along with the other supplies. Miles had taken none. Wouldn't. Felt exhausted, but his mind kept churning. If what he had seen from the red banners and yellow tigers was the best they could do, Lucien Carr didn't stand a chance, and Marshal Barma appeared more concerned with towing the political line than solving last night's murders. It was all spiraling. Not my business, he reminded himself, not anymore. But the questions kept coming. Who would be brazen enough to blow up a group of militia? What could Lucien possibly know to be worth taking that kind of risk? He texted Marshal Barma, "Any surveillance footage you can link?" After a minute, Barma replied, "You're supposed to be convalescing. Heard you left the hospital." "I don't do hospitals. The footage? We're done. My office has no access to the investigation. Thanks for the help." "Talk?" Miles typed. "No. Finishing supper, and then I'm going to sleep for a week and hope tigers and banners don't shoot each other to bits while I'm out. Here's your stipend for today." A credit link pinged on his device. Hardly a fortune, but it would pay the rent for the next few days. Instant, no restrictions on how it could be spent. So, unlike a Meridian paycheck, where the credits had to be used on limited things and couldn't be saved, as they would expire. No wonder so many had struck out to settle in Seraph and places beyond. Miles texted, "Hear any word on the victim's devices, messages sent before the meetup, financial transactions?" Someone preparing to pay for something? It's the sheriff's business now. That was it. Barma was quitting. Sleeping for a week sounded like a good idea. But Miles couldn't. The dog had curled up and was snoring when he climbed out of bed. Sunset outside. The hotel was getting loud, as his neighbors on either side were just getting in, talking, and turning on their serials at high volume. The dog had no problem snoozing through it all. He turned on Insight. 2 hours until his overnight security shift began at the construction site, assuming he still had a job. But there was no notice from his boss to indicate otherwise. Minor miracles. To Tristan he texted, "Come get me before work." "Can't. We'll barely make it on time as it is." With limited bus options, Miles knew he'd have to walk. Calling Zoe or Dylan was out of the question, but then he checked his balance. With the stipend, he had enough for a rental, and a quick check on SeraphNet confirmed a service could send a vehicle over. Expensive, and after a week he'd have to give the car up, and he'd be back in the same position of needing to scrape for rides. He clicked his tongue. The dog looked up, immediately alert. Miles said, "What do you say we go out and find us a ride of our own?" Chapter 16. The electric motorbike was more of a scooter with a long rear rack meant for strapping cargo. Plus, it was used, the engine difficult to start, in eggshell blue, but it ran, and the dealer let him off the lot with a few credits to spare, after withstanding a withering round of attempted upsells. He had just under an hour before his shift began. The dog balanced on the back, leaning forward and occasionally bumping against Miles during hard turns. But Miles kept his speed down, uncertain of how hard he could push the vehicle. Plus, as his head was still ringing, he was worried about his own ability to navigate the Seraph streets without killing himself. "We have a discount on helmets," the salesperson had offered just before Miles had departed. Said without a hint of irony. The Bright Blocks neighborhood lived up to its name in the early evening, with hundreds of lights of every imaginable color shining from the container homes. The streets between were barely lit, though, and Miles had to concentrate lest he plow directly into one of dozens of steel walls jutting into the roadway. But soon enough, the ground grew rough, and he left the lights behind as he crossed the berm into the vast junkyard west of the city. Without Insight as his navigation aid, he doubted he would have found the exact location of the crime scene. Another reason to believe all 3 victims had their devices, plus any type of map program in their cars. They had met at the prearranged spot at a precise time. He doubted any of them were excessively familiar with the area. He slowed the bike as he got close. He scanned each narrow lane in search of any other vehicle. Surely Red District had secured such a sensitive site, but for the moment he was alone. Perhaps the militia had scoured it, cleaned the crime scene, and left. He parked at the mouth of the alley. It was empty. Both of the other victims' vehicles were gone. "Stay," he told the dog. It whined once before sniffing about the mud where Miles had parked his bike. He didn't know what he was expecting to find. Nothing, he felt certain. Not his circus, not his monkeys. Closure, he thought cynically. One last look and he could excuse himself and go back to his night job and let the sheriff sort out the mess. Yellow "Do Not Enter" tape crisscrossed the middle of the alley. Miles ducked beneath it and pulled more of the tape away from the door leading into the container. He clicked on his flashlight and shined the white beam about. Took careful steps forward as he approached where the bodies had lain. The table and chairs had been pushed against the wall. Blood still marked the floor and furnishings. At least the dead had been removed, but the rest appeared as it had been. Whatever analysis had taken place must have been quick, using scanning software and photography. Miles detected no scent of forensic chemicals, further leading him to the conclusion that this was a rushed investigation. Scuff marks of a dozen boots had obliterated whatever story the blood spatters on the floor might tell. He crouched for a few minutes next to where the table had stood and tried to imagine the event. 3 shooters unloading in rapid succession, 3 deaths. Besides streaks in the grime, the floor told him nothing new. A single burner hole in the ceiling. Final shot as one victim fell. Burner blasts rarely penetrated a human body and came out the other side. The hand-sized weapons didn't pack enough punch. He walked a careful circle, trying to imagine the chairs where they had fallen. But he had seen enough to know no one else had been sitting there, and there was no sign Lucian Carr had been at the table. And unless the young man had come in barefoot or in socks, his shoes hadn't touched the floor of the cargo containers. What were the facts? 3 bodies. They had shot each other, judging by the location of the wounds. Bing Patton had blasted Xander Trowbridge with a shotgun. Shahid Har had the Krone pocket burner, a better fashion accoutrement than a defensive weapon. Miles didn't know if he had gotten a shot off, but the third weapon, the military-grade burner, had been emptied. Trowbridge's gun and laser wounds had taken down both Shahid and Bing. Without the bodies, there was no way to know how many holes each man had in him. More facts. Besides Lucian, the 3 had met alone, and they had known when and where to meet. The Red Banner militia now held the vehicles and personal possessions that might shed light on any communication between the victims and other parties prior to the shootout. And finally, all 3 victims were powerful men, wealthy, with major pull in Seraph. Next came suspicions. Red Banners and Sheriff Vaca had an interest in keeping this all to themselves. Miles checked the time. If he wanted to make the start of his shift, he needed to leave. Yet he remained crouched. Trowbridge had cut loose with all 12 shots. Some had struck Bing and Shahid, but not all. One burned hole in the ceiling, that he knew of. He played the light around and saw no more. He leaned over the table. 2 more, neat melted perforations, both penetrating the plastic. He walked a wider circle, still trying to avoid the blood. Another round had hit the corner of the container near the rear curtain, and then 3 more in the wall. From the table to there, it was reasonable that Trowbridge's frantic burst had been the source. More misses than hits, but enough had found their marks. Miles froze. Next to the rightmost burn hole was a smudge. Grease. Mud. He shined the light and leaned close, almost putting his cheek to the metal. Blood. A blood mark with a 4th burn inside it. Bing had fired his shotgun in the opposite direction, and a burner wouldn't carry tissue like this. Laser wounds cauterized, and there was little spray. This was too big. Someone had been standing here and had caught a burner round and had been close enough to fall back against the wall. Perhaps they had been leaning. Perhaps many things, but Miles stopped himself. What were the facts? There had been a 4th person present. Everyone investigating had missed it, and whoever it was had made it out of the container alive. Chapter 17. Miles felt his hands shaking as he took out his device. He wanted to call Marshal Barma. This was his department. But Barma had made it clear they were no longer involved, and Miles didn't think an appeal of any kind would get Barma off his rear and back into the investigation. A potential witness and possible new suspect be damned. Calling the sheriff would get him arrested. That left Santa Butra. But whatever she might bring to the table, it might put her in a compromising position, aiding an interested party with no legal reason for trespassing on a crime scene. He put the phone away. Through the curtain, he inspected the area in search of anything he might have missed. The back entrance yielded nothing. The floor was grimy, dirty, and covered with mud and boot prints too muddled to recognize with a quick examination using a flashlight. Outside was the second alley where he and the marshal had first met. More gravel and oily mud. No telltale blood trail. A Meridian crime scene drone could sniff out blood and all the trace elements. So could a trained dog. Operative word, trained. He went back inside, moving inch by inch, checking walls and ceiling, but he had missed nothing. He played the light beam back across a panel of wall and its adjoining portion of floor. Did it look cleaner than everything else? It was just off the main track where passers-by would walk if they were cutting through the containers, so there were no boot prints, but it also lacked the grime. He crouched and slid a finger along the ground. Clean. It took a moment, but the steel wall had a discernible seam. The precise cut allowed no room to pry easily, and Miles didn't have a knife or tool. He pushed. The panel didn't budge. Checking outside, the outer shell of the shipping container was too high to climb without a boost. He went back in and through the curtains to the crime scene. The plastic chairs had nothing which would help, but he flipped the table to its side. The edge was metal. With his right hand, he bent a section back and forth, until it snapped. Smoothed an edge. This he brought back to the secret panel and worked it. The panel leaned and he pulled it away, breaking part of a plastic lip which was holding it in place. A tunnel led into darkness. The striated steel walls and low ceiling were part of the surrounding containers. Crawling was the only way. While Miles wasn't particularly claustrophobic, the thought of being trapped in the narrow space gave him pause. Another smudge of an old blood stain up ahead caught his eye. He went forward. The clean patch gave way to a film of gunk, alternately slick and sticky. A reek of old oil and heady fumes penetrated his sinuses. His throat started burning and his chest grew tight. He blinked tears away. The hard metal beneath him did his knees no favors, as he did his best to hurry. Dead end. The steel wall before him felt smooth and didn't budge. He tried his impromptu pry bar, but there was nothing to latch onto, and he only bent it. The light showed no seams. Yet somehow, someone had come this way. He cocked his right arm, preparing to punch the wall, but stopped himself. Breathed. Ignored the pinching in his lungs. His head felt loopy. Crawling back was the only way to go, but at the moment he feared he might pass out, and if he went down inside the crawl space, he feared he wouldn't wake up. He reappraised the steel surrounding him, had missed nothing. He fumbled with the flashlight for a moment, dropped it. Was it his imagination, or did he detect a faint, cool puff of air? He switched the light off. A dim glow came from a line in the wall just behind him. He shoved. It didn't give. But a square in the section of wall was cut out. He backed up for better leverage, braced his back against the opposite side of the corridor, and pressed every direction he could. The panel slid to the left, haltingly at first, and then it fell away and clattered loudly, the carang echoing about the enclosed space beyond. A lamp burned orange in a small room. The air smelled different, but still held a distinct chemical odor. Disinfectants, bleach, something, along with a putrid smell, human, with a hint of sewage and unwashed bodies. Someone was sprawled on a lumpy bedroll in a shadowy recess. Soiled bandages lay strewn about. Wrappers of medical supplies likewise had been dropped or cast aside, along with cut clothing and containers of medicine. Miles fought to stand, his joints complaining with a drum riff of racks and pops. He stifled a cough. Whoever was on the bedroll wheezed. "Hello? I don't want to surprise you. I'm Miles Kim. I'm not a cop. I'm not here to hurt you." He did his best to appear harmless and show he wasn't armed. He edged closer. It was a young woman lying before him. Gauze covered much of her head, neck, and one arm. A saline drip bag was hoisted on a crude, bent wire fixed to a wall. A box next to her overflowed with more soiled wrappings. The stench grew stronger. Blood and pus soaked through her dressings. He brushed black hair from her face, but much of her head was recently shaved. One eye was completely bandaged and wept a yellowish ooze. Crude, seeping stitchwork ran across one side of her jawline. Her left shoulder was wrapped. The wound appeared to be about the right height for the burner marked back at the container. On one arm, a burner wound, not new. A pucker mark along with old stitch marks, perhaps a month old. A hand with purple fingernails reached for him. Her one eye flashed with recognition. "Miles?" He took her hand. He knew her. The woman who had pretended to be the Heron Collie lawyer on his train ride to Seraph. She was the bounty hunter who had let him go in favor of stealing the item that had triggered the Seraph Express robbery. She had also suffered a burner wound on her arm. "Dawn Moridi, what are you doing here?" Chapter 18. What happened to you? Dawn's eyes fluttered. Get me out of here. Miles made a careful examination of her wounds. The bandages on her head, neck, and arm were more than what would be needed for a single laser burn. Someone had performed wholesale surgery. I don't know if it's safe to move you. She squeezed his wrist. Hurry, before they come back. Who? Who did this? You were in the shipping container during the shootout. You got hit. Yeah, genius, I got shot, she said through clenched teeth. And then someone found me and did this. They tore out my implants. He had too many questions, but if someone was going to return to continue their work, he had no weapon. She feebly grasped for the line in her arm but was too weak. If I get you up, it'll hurt you, maybe kill you. If they catch us, we're both dead. He pulled the cover off her. Her legs were undamaged. He gently detached the ceiling drip. She was shivering. He wrapped the sheet around her and lifted her. Why aren't you packing? She asked. I'll explain later. Do you have a vehicle? Don't know. They took everything. Can't imagine they left it. A single door led outside. When Miles pushed it, it shuddered. Something was holding it closed. He delivered a solid kick. Something broke, and whatever latch had been set fell apart. He nudged the door all the way open with his back and got them out. They emerged between large containers, partially submerged into the ground. Above was the night sky, the stars obscured by haze. Miles was turned around, and Insight was having a moment with its compass. The alley between any of the containers was tight enough that carrying Dawn would prove difficult. He was about to choose a direction when he heard a dog bark. Dawn's breathing came in ragged gasps. Hang on, he said. He changed course and hoped the passageway would get him close to where he had left his bike. He didn't want to shout for the dog in case there really was someone nearby. The thought of what had been done to her sent a chill down his spine, and he pushed aside the dizzying notion she was involved in the violence from the previous night. Her presence meant her life was in danger once word got out. The dog appeared at the mouth of the alley. Its eyes reflected the meager light, and it chuffed as Miles inched along, mindful of not bumping Dawn's head against the metal. They were on a wide lane which led to the alley. Miles' bike waited for them. You're going to have to hang on, he said. But Dawn's head lolled. She had gone completely limp. From somewhere behind them came the rapping clang of metal on metal. The signal was answered by someone closer by. A softer thud, 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 steel on plastic. A shrill hoot rose from the dark, which caused the dog to bark. Shut up, Miles hissed. With Dawn clutched in his arms, he straddled the scooter seat and fumbled for the controls. Hit the starter switch. Nothing. He slammed the button and gritted his teeth as the engine popped, puttered, died. Motion in front of him. Someone had just run across the wide lane which led deeper into the junkyard. A sharp hammering followed by a hoot. Another voice answered with an identical cry. They were close, too close. Come on, machine. Miles pressed the button deliberately and firmly, and didn't let go until the engine clicked, whirred, and hummed to life. He began the awkward process of scooting the bike into a sharp U-turn. Dog. He wasn't sure what he would do if the animal ignored him, but it sprang up onto the back of the scooter and nearly unbalanced them. He planted a foot to avoid spilling over, reasserted his grip on Dawn, and grabbed the handlebar. Something whizzed past. Insight tracked it as the bottle shattered against the side of a shipping container. Miles squeezed the accelerator and the bike lurched forward. They wobbled precariously, hitting a rut as the tires fought to find purchase on the slick sand. Someone jumped in front of them. Miles gunned it and they struck the figure, sending them tumbling aside. Miles kicked down to stop them from falling, got the bike rolling forward again, and gave it everything it had. Gravel sprayed, but he kept them upright, willing the machine to not die, to not stall, and to get them out of there alive. Chapter 19. Where are you going? Dawn fought to get each word out. She clung to consciousness and threatened to drop out of his arm if his attention lapsed. They were navigating bright blocks. Insight kept wanting them to turn down the smallest streets, but Miles doggedly ignored it, intent on using the route he had used to get them there. He kept squeezing the accelerator. Hospital. No. Anywhere but there. You're dying. They ripped your implants out. Yeah. Was there for that, but if you take me to the hospital, they'll kill me. Who? Those butchers? She tried unsuccessfully to shake her head. No. Meridian. Then where? He couldn't hear her response. When he chanced to look, he saw she had passed out again. How many junkies, battered spouses, and bleeding criminals had tried to refuse medical care, as if their prospects would be worse if they ended up in the hospital. But with Dawn Meridi, all bets were off. Someone was willing to kill Seraph cops to get at what she knew or had witnessed. So what did all three victims have to do with Meridian? While the corporation governed River City and its surrounding territory, their boundary ended halfway to Seraph. That didn't mean Meridian's reach stopped there. Everyone suspected they had agents in Seraph and Pacific City, but it was mutual business concerns which kept the peace between the three governments, along with a common hatred for the caretakers. The thought that Meridian agents might be behind the violence was a level of complication beyond his understanding. First things first, he had a dying woman who needed care. If the hospital was out, then where? The hotel was no good, and Barma wasn't reliable enough to trust with this. The sheriff and either militia were both suspect. And while Dylan might have a medical doctor in his contact list, he couldn't bring this kind of storm down on his son. Cole Santa Bruter Sin. Insight complied and his phone rang. Your girlfriend? Dawn muttered. Not my girlfriend, just a friend. She's Yellow Tiger. You can't. Right now we don't have a choice. I'm driving, and it's my call. She's the best bet for getting you someplace safe. Dawn tried to reply, but her face tightened as she winced. Mistake, she managed. Santa Petra answered. Miles, you understand I sleep nights. It's important. I have someone who needs a doctor, a clinic, someone discreet, and not the hospital. Why not the hospital? I can't explain right now, he said. Does this have anything to do with Lucian Carr and the shooting? Don't ask me that unless you really want to know. A long sigh. Santa Butra said, I'm trusting you to know what you're doing, but my trust has limits. I wouldn't call you if I had other options. That makes me feel special. Miles came to an intersection and adjusted his load. The dog nudged him. I need a place to go. I'll tell you everything once I get there. If you can't, I understand. But you have to choose now. Keep it together, Kim. I'm looking it up, sending you the address. But I'm warning you, this better not get me in deeper with my bosses. I'm up to my neck already, and I hate the smell. The address pinged, and Insight suggested a rather swoopy route to get there. Miles got them rolling. Before hanging up, he said, I'll keep you out of this, I promise. Much like the Yellow Tiger militia station, the trauma center had imposing walls around it, and a gate. Spotlights clicked on as he pulled up to a call box with a staring eye of white light. Before he could say anything, the light twinkled and the gate rolled open. A team of 3 in green hospital garb waited for them, a gurney in place, and they took the unconscious Dawn from his arms and laid her out on the gurney before raising it and wheeling her through a set of automatic doors. Miles parked his vehicle next to a row of ambulances and first response motorbikes. No Yellow Tiger insignia. Each vehicle featured the letters ALT in an oval, streaking left to right in a circle with a tail, like a comet. The ALT insignia was on the doors as well, which swung open for Miles as he entered the clinic. Cold blue lights illuminated a tiny empty waiting area walled off with glass. One of a pair of receptionists looked up from her work. Her eyes narrowed. No dogs. Oh, him? Miles asked. He's with me. Saying he's with me doesn't make it okay. We can't have dogs in the trauma center. Miles plopped down on one of the hard chairs and put out his hand. The dog wedged itself next to him and he patted it. If anyone else comes in and complains, I'll take him outside." The receptionists muttered between themselves, but Miles ignored it, took a moment to catch his breath. On the wall behind the receptionists were a pair of black carbines. He hadn't seen armed medicals since the war. What kind of trouble did they expect at a private hospital? He knew he should look up ALT to see what kind of facility this was and who it serviced, but he was too tired and had a pretty good guess. This was a private hospital where anyone who could pay for the extra security would go. Whether it was militia or just for the wealthy, he had no idea. But Santa Butra had pre-cleared them, and Dawn was getting the care she needed. The dog nudged him when a doctor in scrubs, AR glasses, and a face mask emerged. "You brought in the patient?" "Miles Kim. How is she?" "Being prepped for surgery. We don't have any information about her. Who can we contact for medical records?" "No one. She's new in town." "You must know something. We're running a check on her biosignatures, but nothing's coming up." As Miles expected, Dawn had wiped his records clean, so he could only imagine she was a ghost, if she wanted to be. "At least tell us her name," the doctor said. Captain Sin entered the waiting room from the parking lot. In will do, Dr. Pham." Dr. Pham blinked, and his glasses shifted colors. "Please inform the receptionists if you decide you can share anything. Manescio has had her implants forcibly removed, has been shot, and has unknown drugs in her system that will take us time to sort out before we can sedate her." "Do your best, doctor." She waited for him to go before sitting down next to Miles. "Start talking." "This is impressive. Yellow Tigers hold a contract with them?" "Yes. Red District 2. There's this place for serious injuries, and 2 clinics. Plus they send their doctors out when needed. Not just us. Mining and construction companies, people like Heron Colley, anyone who wants extra security and discretion. But that's not what I want to talk about." "She was there at the shootout," Miles said. "Front row seat. Caught a burner wound." "Who is she?" "I'm sure I don't really know, but I can guess. Dawn Moridi, if that's even her name, is an opportunist. She's got skills and had high-end implants and probably worked for the upper echelons of Meridian. Intelligence service, I'd wager. She came after me, but then she cut me loose when the opportunity presented itself to take what the metalheads stole off the Seraph Express." "Which was what?" 3 people died trying to buy it or take it from her. The people who snatched Lucian want her and what she has." Santa Butra scowled. "And now she's here. Just great. I can't just make this go away. A visit here generates paperwork. We saved her life. Between you and me, we can figure out how to proceed. You're not supposed to be involved. This is you handing off a mess, whether or not you believe you're helping." "No one has to know she's here," Miles said. The doc admitted her anonymously, didn't he? N. That's your code for a John or Jane Doe?" "Yeah, but people aren't stupid. Both militias have access to all the hospital's databases. I don't know who Dawn is, but I know where you found her. You triggered a crime scene alarm. Red Banner sent a patrol out and they're combing the scene right now. Tell me what they're gonna find." Miles only needed a moment to think about what he had discovered. The blood stain, the secret panel, the passageway to the room where he had found Dawn. "I didn't have time to tidy up," he said. "So I guessed. Whatever happened to Dawn Moridi is horrific. You did a solid by saving her, Kim. But right now she's in just as much danger as if you had taken her to Wood Creek Hospital. You were my only option. I don't know any underground sawbones. She was dying." "Yeah, all right. What's done is done. Now I just need to figure out what happens next. I'm going to get some of my people here quietly, because this place isn't made to do more than discourage anyone who might cause a problem." She put on her monocle. "And Kim? Who brings a dog into a hospital anyway?" Chapter 20. Yellow Tiger militia showed up right before sunrise. Dr. Pham had come out for an update an hour before and informed Miles and Santa Butra that the patient had been stabilized and was going to survive, but there would be complications. Whoever had ripped Dawn Meridi's cybernetics out from her had shot her up with a cocktail of drugs to keep her from thrashing during the involuntary procedure, and they had been less than careful. They didn't get to her medulla implant, thank God, Dr. Pham said. Miles tried to force the fog out of his head. Maybe that would have been round 2. She was hooked up to a drip bag, so they were caring for her to some extent. Perhaps she's not out of the woods yet. I'll keep you posted. Now, with 2 additional cops inside, the waiting room felt cramped. One consulted with Captain Sin in a hushed, urgent conversation. When another pair of officers arrived, Miles took the dog and stepped out for a breath of fresh air. Paramedics were preparing one of the ambulances, loading it with supplies. A chill clung to the air even as the light reflected down off a neighboring building. He had ignored messages from Tristan. "Where are you?" "You're making me handle the shift alone." "Past midnight, you there?" "So bored." "I'm doing your rounds for you. You dead?" "Hope you're dead because I'm handling everything right now." "Sorry about last, please reply." "Clocking us out. You owe me big time." Miles was about to reply when a militia tank rolled up to the gate. Also Yellow Tiger. But the group that deployed out of the vehicle carried rifles, were armored, and they appeared ready for business. The paramedics stopped their work and stared as the group waited to be let in. Santa Butra marched out of the clinic and towards the gate. Miles recognized the officer in charge of the newly arrived group, Lieutenant Chindi, but he was wearing captain's bars on the collar of his chest piece. Someone had received a promotion since their last encounter. Chindi stabbed the call box button and peered through the bars of the gate. "Captain Chindi, Yellow Tigers. We've been assigned security for the clinic. Let us in." Santa Butra turned a key in the manual lock override. Now the receptionist couldn't buzz the gate open remotely. "Captain Sin, what are you doing?" Chindi asked. "Stealing the clinic, Captain Chindi. We already have a security detail here, and you're not in charge of it. You're on administrative leave. Open up now." Santa Butra gave Miles a weary look before returning her attention to their new visitors. "I'm a sworn officer of the Yellow Tigers, and I'm authorized to act in harmony with Seraph law when confronted with an emergency like this." "Like what?" "Nothing's been filed, and you've commandeered active militia units outside of proper channels. I don't report to you. Just because you're out of the loop doesn't mean I'm violating civil or corporate regulations. This situation is under my control. Who called you here?" Chindi didn't answer, instead talking on the radio to his squad. Santa Butra stepped closer to Miles. "I can only hold them off for so long. They'll have backup soon." "Someone at the clinic must have notified him," Miles said. He pulled out his device. "What are you doing?" "Making a call of my own. What's the average militia response time in this part of town?" The Red Banner cruiser pulled up behind the Yellow Tiger tank. A second unit followed, parking across the street, and soon a third. "What did you do?" Santa Butra whispered. "Now it's a party. It's a Red Banner investigation. If you're really trying to keep your friend out of their hands, you failed. Your tigers were about to swarm in. I had to do something." The 2 militia groups were arguing. Captain Chindi waded into the confrontation, but was met head-on by a Red Banner officer who wasn't backing down. Hands were on holstered weapons. The voices got loud. Santa Butra joined Miles as they retreated from the gate. "What did you tell them?" "I requested Red Banner send a unit here to stop a group of rogue Yellow Tigers or someone impersonating them from stealing medical supplies." "This is no good. They'll sort it out soon enough." "I'm sorry. There's no way we can keep your friends safe. Red District won't be as polite as the Yellow Tigers." "Where are you going?" Miles headed into the clinic. Using insight, he mapped the place out as best he could, as he charged past the reception desk and through the door labeled "No visitors and trauma team staff only." The dog was on his heels, but Santa Butra stayed behind at the entrance. He spotted 2 other exits, clearly marked by signs. But none of it would mean anything if Dawn Meridi couldn't travel. A doctor or nurse in a gown intercepted him. "You can't be back here. I need to lay eyes on my friend who we brought." "Which room?" She got in his way and raised a hand to stop him. "Sir, please go back to the waiting area and I'll get the doctor." "I don't need him. It's urgent." She looked over her shoulder. For a moment, Miles thought she was about to lead him to Dawn's room, but instead she raised a microphone on a comm device she was wearing around her head. "I need security." "Hey!" Miles took the device and flung it into a hazardous waste bin before brushing past her. She was shouting now, and the trauma center wasn't that large. He only had seconds. The heart of the facility centered on a large nurse's station, and clear glass separated the patient recovery rooms, each visible. Miles saw one man in a bed connected to machines. Otherwise, the recovery rooms were empty. Scratch that, and one had its curtains closed. He moved straight past another nurse who didn't stop him. When he entered through the curtain, Dawn was pulling on a white pajama top. She had fresh bandages on her head, arms, and body. She kept placing a hand on the bed to steady herself. "How could you bring me here? You were dying. And now I'm leaving. Don't try to stop me." He grabbed a pair of slippers from an open cabinet and placed them on the floor before her. "I'm not." "You're in trouble. Both militias are here. I didn't have the chance to explain much earlier to you, but they both want you. That's why this place is a mistake. I'm burned." He helped steady her as she slid her feet into the slippers. She tried to walk past him, but had to pause and almost collapsed in the doorway. The nurse from earlier was storming their direction with a cop following right behind. "All right, Miles," Dawn said. "Get me out of here, and I'll make it worth your while." "That's him," the nurse said, as if there was a lineup of trespassing cyborgs to choose from. The security guard was all hands and tried to move Miles along, while grabbing him. "You were asked to step outside. Come with me." Miles shoved. The guard stumbled and fell. The nurse screamed. Miles took Dawn and guided her towards the nearest exit. She was leaning by the time they made it out into an alley between the trauma center and the outer wall. Large air units hummed away, and a dumpster sat before a secondary gate that had electronic locks. An alarm began bleeding. Miles had to hope the militia was still squabbling, because it would only take a moment for anyone to catch them once a search started. Dawn led them to the dumpster. "Boost me up. This is no good. You're ready to collapse. Do it or I'd go alone." She didn't weigh much. It took barely any effort to get her on top of the dumpster. She didn't wait, grabbing the wall, swinging her legs over, and slipping down on the opposite side. The dog barked. Miles climbed to the top of the wall. "Sorry, buddy, you're on your own." The shouting from the front had only gotten louder, but the alarm drowned out everything else. Miles dropped to the sidewalk on the opposite side of the wall. Dawn rushed ahead, out of place in her white robes and looking exactly like an escaped patient. She peered around the corner. "I'll get the bike," Miles said. She clenched her jaw like she wanted to say something, then nodded. Miles jog-walked past the militia clustered around the trauma center's main gate. One of the red banner cops pushed a yellow tiger. The tiger responded by pulling his weapon. More shouts, orders from each to stand down and back off. He brought the scooter around to the alley. Dawn hobbled over and grabbed hold. "Go!" Miles took his device out and texted, "Just a sec. There. All right, hang on." Her grip was tight on him as they sped off. "Who did you message?" Dawn asked. "Keep your shirt on. I needed to make sure someone would take care of my dog."